Good things, Dad. Adrian doesn't want you here anymore, and frankly, neither do I. That's what my daughter said to me. Not shouted, said. Calm, like she was telling me the weather. My son-in-law stood behind her with his arms crossed, looking at the wall just past my shoulder. Couldn't even meet my eyes. I was 63 years old, standing in the kitchen of a house I had helped pay for, holding a cup of coffee I hadn't finished yet. I set the cup down on the counter. I didn't say a word. Let me back up, because none of this came out of nowhere. Things never do. My wife Patricia, God rest her, passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. We had 41 years together. Good years, mostly. We raised one daughter, Fiona, and we were proud of the woman she became. Smart, driven, got herself a master's degree in business administration, married Adrian Colby, who worked in commercial real estate and had the kind of firm handshake that tells you a man learned it from a book. When Patricia got sick, Fiona came home for the last 6 months. I was grateful for that. I still am. That part is true. After the funeral, after the relatives went home and the casseroles stopped coming, I was alone in our house in Dayton, Ohio for the first time in my adult life. 4,200 square feet and every room too quiet. I'd walk to the kitchen in the morning and set 2 coffee cups out before I caught myself. Fiona called every Sunday. Adrian sent me a Christmas card. It was fine. Then about 2 years after Patricia passed, Fiona called on a Wednesday, not a Sunday, which already told me something was different. Dad, Adrian and I had been talking. We want you to come live with us. They had a house in Columbus. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, good neighborhood. Fiona said I could have the entire lower level to myself. Private bathroom, separate entrance from the garage, my own space. She said it would be good for all of them. They had 2 kids by then, my grandchildren, Owen, who was 7, and little Cora, who had just turned 4. I told her I'd think about it. I thought about it for 3 days, and then I said yes. Because the truth is, an empty house at 61 years old is a particular kind of loneliness that I wouldn't wish on anyone, and I missed those kids more than I knew how to say. I sold the Dayton house, made a decent amount, the market was good. I put the bulk of it into my investment accounts and didn't touch the rest. I'd spent 38 years as a civil engineer, put away what I was supposed to put away, lived carefully. I wasn't rich the way people say rich on television. But I was secure. More than secure. I moved into the basement in October. The first few months were genuinely good. I had dinner with them most nights. I took Owen to his Saturday morning soccer games when Adrian had showings. I picked Cora up from pre-K on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she'd fall asleep in the back seat on the way home, and I'd sit in the parked car for 10 minutes just watching her breathe. That was the best part of all of it. I offered Fiona money for expenses, groceries, utilities, my share of things. She waved me off the first couple times, so I started leaving a check on the kitchen counter on the first of every month, $1,200. She tried to refuse. I told her it wasn't negotiable. I wasn't going to be a guest in her house eating her food and running her hot water for free. That's not who I am. Things started to shift around month 4. I noticed small things first. Adrian coming home later. Fewer family dinners. Fiona looking tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. One evening I came upstairs for a glass of water around 9 and heard them talking in the bedroom. Not fighting exactly, but that low, tight kind of talking that means the same thing. I didn't listen. I went back downstairs. Then in February, about 5 months in, Fiona came down to talk to me on a Sunday afternoon. She sat across from me at my little table with her hands folded in her lap and said that Adrian felt the arrangement was more expensive than they'd planned. The utilities had gone up. The basement renovation had cost more than budgeted. Owen needed braces. I asked her what number she had in mind. She looked uncomfortable. She said Adrian thought $2,500 a month would be more fair. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, fine, and I started leaving $2,500 on the counter on the first of every month. I didn't say anything else about it, but I started paying closer attention. Adrian was not a bad man when I first met him. I want to be fair about that. He worked hard. He loved Fiona in his way. He coached Owen's soccer team one season, even though he clearly hated being outdoors in November. There was a decent man in there somewhere. But there was also a man who had gotten used to living at a certain level without quite having the income to support it. The house was more than they could comfortably carry on 2 salaries. Fiona had gone back to work part-time after Cora was born, but never full-time. Adrian's commissions were unpredictable. The kind of unpredictable where some months were fine and some months were very much not fine. I figured this out slowly, the way you figure out most things when you're not looking for them. In April, Adrian came downstairs for the first time since I'd moved in. He asked if I wanted to watch the game. I said sure. We sat there with a couple of beers and he told me, more than he probably meant to, about a deal that had fallen through. A client who backed out at the last minute, a quarter that hadn't gone the way he'd projected. I mostly listened. I told him things had a way of evening out. He nodded. Then he said kind of carefully, "You know, if you ever wanted to invest in the property rather than just paying rent, there might be something there." I said I'd think about it. I thought about it and I decided no. I kept my finances separate. That was a line I'd drawn for myself before I ever moved in. I think that's when things started going the wrong direction with Adrian, not all at once, but I think that's when. By summer, I was paying $2,500 a month, cooking my own meals most nights, and spending the majority of my time in the basement, or taking the grandkids somewhere so Fiona and Adrian could have the house to themselves. Which I did gladly, for the kids, not because anyone asked nicely. Fiona started having what I'd call conversations with me every couple of months. The hot water heater needed replacing. The property taxes had gone up. Her car needed new tires. Each time she'd frame it as just keeping me informed, but each time I'd leave a check. I was up to $3,200 a month by October. In November, Cora got sick, nothing serious, a bad ear infection that hung on for 3 weeks, and I spent a lot of time upstairs helping out. Getting Owen off to school, making soup, sitting with Cora when she couldn't sleep. One night around 2 in the morning, I heard her crying and got up before either of them did. By the time Fiona came down the hall, Cora was already settled back against my shoulder watching cartoons with the volume off. Fiona stood in the doorway for a moment. She said, "Thanks, Dad." That was a good night. But the next morning, Adrian was in a bad mood about something work-related, and at breakfast he made a comment to Fiona, not to me, while I was standing right there refilling my coffee, about how the situation in the basement was getting complicated. I didn't ask what he meant. I went back downstairs. December was tense in a way that everyone pretended not to notice. And then, on a Tuesday evening in January, Fiona came down to the basement, sat across from me with her hands in her lap, just like that first time, and said they needed to talk about the arrangement. I waited. She said Adrian felt that given everything, the space I was using, the burden on the household, their financial commitments, they thought a more appropriate contribution would be $4,500 a month. I put down the book I'd been reading. "Fiona," I said, "I'm already paying $3,200. She looked at the table. "I know. That's more than most people pay in rent in Columbus." "I know, Dad. But the mortgage." "Is not my mortgage," I said. She got quiet. Then she said, "Adrian thinks you should be contributing more, given what you have." And there it was. What you have. I asked her how Adrian knew what I had. She didn't answer. I told her I needed to think about it. She went back upstairs. I sat in that basement for 2 hours. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't pick up my book. Just sat. I have a financial advisor named Gretchen, who I've worked with for 11 years. The next morning, I drove to her office and we talked for 90 minutes. I told her everything. She didn't say much while I was talking. When I finished, she said, "Warren, what do you want to do?" I told her. She nodded and we got to work. I spent the next 3 weeks getting my financial house in order. I'd had accounts scattered across a few institutions, moved things around over the years the way you do. Gretchen helped me consolidate, restructure, verify. At the end of those 3 weeks, I had a clear picture of everything I owned. It came to just over $2.4 million. between retirement accounts, brokerage, and the proceeds from the Dayton house that I'd invested. Not 12 million, not by a long stretch, but mine, entirely mine. Built over 38 years of showing up every day to a job that mattered. I then called a real estate attorney named Douglas MacPhail, who a colleague of mine had used in a property dispute years earlier. I asked him what my obligations were if I chose to leave a shared living arrangement. He walked me through it. Ohio has no common law tenancy obligation requiring a family member to provide notice beyond what's courteous. I was not on the deed. I had no legal obligation to the property. I had one other call to make. My accountant to verify the tax implications of restructuring my charitable giving. I'd been meaning to update my estate documents for 2 years. Now seemed like the time. I spent a weekend revising my will. I have a nephew in Raleigh, Patrick, who I've always liked. Straightforward kid, works in logistics, never asked me for anything in his life. And there's a veterans housing organization in Dayton that Patricia used to volunteer with. I made my decisions. I signed the documents. Then I waited. Fiona never came back downstairs to discuss the $4,500. I think she was hoping I'd just start paying it. Adrian apparently thought the same. On the 1st of February, I put $3,200 on the counter, the usual amount. That evening, Adrian knocked on the basement door for the second time in 4 months. I opened it. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. He said they needed me to commit the new amount going forward, or they were going to need to revisit the arrangement. I said, "What does revisit the arrangement mean, Adrian?" He said, "It means this might not be working for us." I told him I understood, and that I'd let him know by the end of the week. He nodded and went back upstairs. I waited 3 more days. On a Thursday, Fiona came downstairs and said what she said. "Pack your things. Adrian doesn't want you here, neither do I." Calm, like the weather. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. The last time I had looked at her that carefully, she'd been in a hospital bed with Owen in her arms, exhausted and proud and completely beautiful. And I had felt something that doesn't have a name in English. Now she was standing in front of me with her jaw set and her shoulders squared, waiting for me to argue or apologize or offer more money. I did none of those things. I set my coffee cup down and I said, "Okay." "Okay," she said. "I'll be out by Sunday," I said. She blinked. She'd been ready for a fight. She didn't know what to do with okay. I did not need until Sunday. I was out by Friday afternoon. I hadn't accumulated much down there. I'd always kept the basement spare, because I'd known somewhere in the back of my mind that this day might come. My clothes, my books, my laptop, a few things of Patricia's that I kept with me. It fit in my car and one rented cargo van. I'd already made arrangements. 3 weeks earlier, while I was meeting with Gretchen and Douglas MacPhail, I'd also contacted a furnished apartment complex near the Short North. Month-to-month lease. Quiet building, good natural light, underground parking. I signed the lease on a Wednesday. I just hadn't moved in yet. On Friday afternoon, I drove out of that neighborhood for the last time. I didn't look in the rearview mirror, which I recognize sounds like something from a movie, but it's simply what happened. I did not call Fiona to say I was out. I sent her a text that said, "Cleared out. Good luck to you both." She didn't respond for 6 hours. Then she sent, "This is very dramatic, Dad." I put the phone in my jacket pocket and went to find somewhere to eat dinner. I gave it 30 days. 30 days of silence. I didn't call. I didn't text. I picked up my mail from a P.O. box I'd set up, and I let the quiet settle around me like something I was learning to wear. My apartment was on the 4th floor. In the mornings, I made coffee and sat by the window and watched the street. I walked to a diner 3 blocks away on the weekends. I got back to the gym, which I hadn't done consistently since before Patricia got sick. I called Patrick in Raleigh a couple times and we talked for an hour about nothing important, and it was the best I'd felt in months. I also, in those 30 days, had my attorney send a certified letter to Fiona and Adrian. The letter was not unfriendly in its tone. It simply stated that in reviewing my financial records, I had identified a pattern of monthly payments made to the household, totaling, from move-in through my departure, just over $41,000, that had been represented to me as temporary and need-based. It further noted that, given the manner of my departure and the statements made to me, I was formally requesting repayment of the final 3 months of payments, approximately $9,600 within 90 days. Douglas MacPhail told me I had limited legal standing to demand it back. I told him I wasn't doing it for legal reasons. Fiona called the next afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 3 minutes long. Her voice was very controlled for the first 2 minutes and then not controlled at all. She said I was being vindictive. She said she had children. She said I knew what their finances looked like. She said, "You have more money than you'll ever spend, Dad, and you're doing this." Adrian called an hour later and did not leave a message. I called Fiona back that evening. She answered on the first ring. I waited until she was done. Then I said, "Fiona, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you told me to leave your house, and I left. That has consequences." She said, "We're your family." I said, "I know." There was a long silence. She said, "The kids ask about you." That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I said, "When Owen or Cora want to talk to me, I'm here. That will never change. But you and Adrian made a decision about what I was worth to this family, and I've made some decisions of my own." She started to say something, and I said, "Get some sleep, Fiona." And I ended the call. The 90 days came and went. I did not receive the repayment. I had not expected to. What I had expected was what came in month 3. A Sunday call from Fiona that was different from the previous ones. Quieter. She said that Adrian's biggest account had walked. She said they were behind on the mortgage. She said she wasn't calling to ask for anything, and then she said she was sorry, and then she did ask. She asked if I would consider a loan. I was quiet for a moment. Then I told her that I'd think about it. I did think about it. For several days. I called her back and said that I would not give them a loan. I told her I loved her, and that I was not going to be the solution to a financial problem that had been building for years before I moved in. I told her that there were HUD housing counselors in Columbus who could help them look at their options, refinancing, payment arrangements, things that people worked through every day. I told her I had already found a name and number and would text it to her. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "That's really all you're going to do." I said, "That and this, if you want to bring Owen and Cora to see me on a Saturday, I will take them to the zoo and I will feed them too much lunch. And I will bring them home tired and happy, the same as I always did. That offer doesn't expire." She hung up. I texted her the number for the housing counselor. That was 14 months ago. I'm still in the apartment near Short North. I've made it mine. Got a real couch finally. Hung some of Patricia's photographs. Built a small routine that suits me in a way that living in someone else's house never did. I do an hour at the gym every weekday morning. I walk. I've been volunteering twice a month with the veterans organization Patricia used to support, and I find I look forward to it in a way I don't fully know how to explain. Owen came to visit on a Saturday in the fall. Just him. He's 9 now, and he asked his mother if he could ride the bus downtown to see me, which I thought showed more backbone than most adults I know. We went to the Science Museum. He ate an entire large order of fries by himself, and I didn't say a word about it. On the way to the bus stop, he said, "Grandpa, why don't you live with us anymore?" I thought about it for a moment. I said, sometimes grown-ups have to figure out what works for them, same as anybody. He thought about that. Then he said, "Do you like it where you live?" I said, "Yeah, I really do." He nodded like that was a sufficient answer. "Maybe it is. Cora and I talk on video call on Sunday evenings. She shows me whatever she's drawing. Last week, it was a horse. The week before, a very detailed map of a place she invented called Flower Mountain, which had a castle, a bakery, and what appeared to be a volcano. I told her I thought Flower Mountain sounded excellent. She agreed. Fiona and I speak occasionally, not often. The calls are shorter than they used to be and more honest, which is a strange trade, but maybe the right one. I don't know yet where the two of us land. I think she's still working out how much of what happened was her decision and how much she handed to Adrian. That's hers to figure out. I can't do it for her. Adrian has not called. I've had people ask me, friends, my buddy Richie from the old job who I get lunch with sometimes, whether I regret the letter, whether I went too far. I always have to think about how to answer that. I don't regret leaving. I should have left sooner, probably. Should have seen what the conversation about $4,500 actually meant, and moved before anyone had to say, pack your things. That's on me. I don't regret the letter. I regret that it was necessary. There's a difference. What I know is this. I gave a lot to that household. Not just money. Though yes, money. But time, and presence, and 2 in the morning with a sick 4-year-old. And October soccer games when it was 38 degrees and nobody else wanted to be there. I gave it freely, but there's a version of freely given that the other person starts to see as a debt you owe them, and that version is dangerous. The moment Fiona said, "Given what you have," I understood that I'd crossed into that territory without realizing it. I am 63 years old. I built what I have by working and saving and not making stupid decisions for 4 decades. I was not put on this earth to be managed. Patricia used to say that the thing about dignity is it doesn't make noise when you lose it. It just quietly slips out the door. And most of the time you don't notice until it's already gone. I noticed. I went and got it back. That's the whole story. That's all of it. I make my own coffee now in my own kitchen, and I drink all of it. The thing I keep coming back to is how calm she was when she said it. Not angry, not even guilty, just calm, like she'd already decided the outcome before she walked down those stairs, and my feelings about it were a logistical detail she'd already accounted for. That calm told me everything I needed to know. I've thought a lot about what led to that moment, and I think the honest answer is that it didn't happen because Fiona became a bad person. It happened because I made it easy, for too long, to treat me like a resource rather than a father. Every time I left a check on that counter without saying a word. Every time I moved the number up because the ask made me uncomfortable, and writing a check was easier than having the conversation. Every time I told myself this was just what family did, I was teaching them without meaning to that there was no flaw, that I would keep absorbing whatever was needed because that's who I was. What you allow is what continues. I learned that the hard way. But here's what I also know. The moment I understood what was happening, really understood it, I didn't collapse. I didn't beg, didn't make a scene, didn't call my brother or my old colleagues to talk through my feelings about it. I got quiet, and I got clear, and I went and did the work. I called Gretchen. I called Douglas. I sat with my own numbers and my own decisions until I knew exactly where I stood. That clarity wasn't something anyone gave me. It was something I built, the same way I built everything else in my life. One careful decision at a time, without a lot of noise. I think that's the part that matters most, looking back. Not the letter, not the 90 days, the part where I chose not to fall apart. There's a version of this story where I go upstairs and argue, where I offer more money, where I let shame talk me into staying somewhere I wasn't wanted because leaving felt like losing. I've known men who took that version. I've watched what it does to them. Dignity isn't something anyone can give you back once you've handed it away. You have to go get it yourself. And sometimes going to get it means walking out a door with your boxes and your car and 38 years of choices that nobody can touch. Fiona is working through something. I don't know what her marriage looks like from the inside. I never really did. Owen is 9 years old and rides the bus downtown to see me at a museum, and that tells me the important things transferred even when everything else got complicated. Cora draws maps of places she invents. These things I hold on to. I'm not angry anymore. Anger takes up space. I'd rather use for something else. What I have now is a 4th-floor apartment with good light and a gym 3 blocks away and a volunteer shift twice a month that Patricia would have loved. I have coffee that I drink all of it every morning without leaving half a cup on someone else's counter. Some people find their footing at 30. I found mine at 63. I'll take it.